So hello friends, hope you all doing well. So today here in this video we'll discuss about the uh, oral mucous membrane. Oral mucous membrane or the oral mucosa. So what is at first we should know that what is oral mucous membrane. So oral mucous membrane is the surface of the oral cavity, that is known as the surface of the oral cavity is known as the oral mucous membrane. So it is the surface of the oral cavity. So oral mucous membrane is the surface of the oral cavity. The surface of the oral cavity is known as oral mucous membrane. Oral mucous membrane. So at first we classify, will now the classification. Now the classification of oral mucous membrane. So the oral mucous membrane, based on this based on their functions, it divides into three major types. So based on their function, it's divided into three major types. There, number one, masticatory mucosa. Masticatory mucosa. Number two, lining or reflecting mucosa. Lining or reflecting mucosa. Lining or reflecting. So number one, that is masticatory mucosa. Number two is lining or reflecting mucosa, and number three, that is, and number third number is specialized mucosa. Specialized mucosa. So there are three types. Number one, masticatory, lining or reflecting, and number three, that is specialized mucosa. So these three types of oral mucous membrane, these are the major three types. So at first we should discuss about the masticatory mucosa. So what is masticatory mucosa? uh, Masticatory mucosa find about, it's comprised about 60%. It's comprised about 60% of the oral cavity. Comprised about 60% of the oral cavity, and it's mainly found on the found on gingiva, then hard palate, hard palate. In this area, masticated mucosa found. And number two, that is lining or reflecting mucosa. It's mainly found on the, it's about 25%. It's mainly found on the lip. It's mainly found on the lip, cheek, vestibular fascia, alveolar mucosa, floor of the mouth, soft palate, etc. Cheek, then vestibular, vestibule, vestibular fornix, then alveolar mucosa, floor of the mouth, soft palate, In this area mainly lining or reflecting mucosa found. So number 3 we'll discuss about specialized mucosa. It's only about 15%. It's comprised only 15% of 50% area of oral cavity. Then it's mainly found on the dorsum of the tongue. It's mainly found on the dorsum of the tongue, taste buds, etc. In this area specialized mucosa found. So now let's talk about the subdivision of the oral mucous membrane. So the subdivision of the oral mucosa. So for the descriptive purpose, for descriptive purpose, oral mucous membrane is divided into into two types. For the descriptive purpose, it's divided for the descriptive purpose. So now they are keratinized, keratinized and and second is non-keratinized. Keratinized and non-keratinized. Keratinized involve masticatory mucosa and vermilion border of lip. Keratinized involved in the masticatory mucosa, involved in masticatory mucosa, masticatory mucosa and vermilion border of lip. And vermilion border of lip. And the non-keratinized involved in the lining mucosa, and specialized mucosa. Lining mucosa and specialized mucosa. And keratinized involved masticatory, vermilion, and non-keratinized lining and specialized mucosa. So this is the subdivision of subdivision of oral mucous membrane. So now let's talk about the functions of oral mucous membrane. So let's talk about the functions of oral mucous membrane. So let's talk about the functions. Functions of oral mucous membrane. So the first function is number 1, that is defense. So number 1 function is defense. So the main function of defense, oral mucous membrane prevents the entry of microorganisms and toxins and the toxic substance of the microorganism. So in this way uh, it prevents the entry of microorganisms and its toxins. So it protects the oral mucus, protects the mouth in this way. And it also secretes antibodies. Also secretes the antibodies and has a efficient humor and all mediated immunity. So number 1 is defense. Function is defense cause it prevents the entry of microorganisms and also it's also secretes antibodies. Now the function number 2, that is protection. Number 2, that is protection. protection. The oral mucosa protects the deeper tissues. The oral mucosa protects the deeper tissues from the mechanical forces which occurs due to the mastication. So number two function is protection, because it protects the deeper tissues from the mechanical force which occurs due to the mastication. And number three function is lubrication. Lubrication. Oral mucous membrane has a numerous salivary glands. Oral mucous membrane has salivary glands, and these salivary glands keep the oral cavity moist, and which prevents the oral mucosa from drying, and mucosa from drying prevents the oral mucosa from drying, and its moistures to easy speech, swelling, and mastication, and perception of taste. So in this way it helps. And number four, that is sensory function. It's sensitive to touch. It's very sensitive to touch, pressure, and pain, and also temperature. So of temperature and sensation of taste is felt in the anterior two-thirds of the tongue. So that is the functions of the oral mucous membrane. So hello, now let's talk about the layers of oral mucous membrane. Layers of oral mucous membrane. Layers of oral mucous membrane. So oral mucous membrane has four layers. This is the layer of oral mucous membrane. First layer, that is, it's a first layer, that is epithelium, and this is the second layer, this is known as lamina propria. This is the second layer, and this is the third layer, which is that is first layer, second layer, this is the third layer, which is submucosa. This is submucosa. It's a loose connective tissue. It's a loose connective tissue. And the last layer, that is bone or muscles. This is the fourth layer, that is bones or muscles. So oral mucous membrane has four layers, that is lamina, epithelium, lamina propria, submucosa, and bone or muscles. So these are the layers of oral mucous membrane. So at first we will discuss about the epithelium. So epithelium, it may be keratinized or non-keratinized, and keratinized also be, and keratinized epithelium should be keratinized and non-keratinized, and the keratinized also may be orthokeratinized and parakeratinized. These are two different types. So epithelium, now the lamina propria. Now let's talk about the layer that is lamina propria. It's a very important layer, important layers. So let's talk about lamina propria. This is lamina propria. It's a connective tissue under the epithelium of the under the epithelium. It's a connective tissue under the epithelium of the mucous membrane. So the and this layer lamina propria contains the salivary glands. It contains different salivary glands. It contains the salivary glands, and lamina propria connective tissue of the variable weakness supports the epithelium, and it is divided into two parts. It's divided into two parts, that is papillary, and two parts that are papillary and reticular parts. Number one, papillary and reticular part. Lamina propria divides into papillary and reticular parts, and these two portions are not separated. They are not separated, and they are continuous. So now let's talk about the submucous. Submucosa, or the loose connective tissue. Submucosa, or the loose connective tissue. So it's a loose connective tissue, and it's which connects the epithelium and submucosa with the epithelium and the lamina propria. Epithelium and lamina propria with the bone or muscles. So that is submucosa, and the last layer is bone or muscles. This is the last layer. So it was the brief description of oral mucous membrane.